Friends and viewers, today I have in my hand one of the beautiful books written by Plato. It is the Republic of Plato, well-known book, a very historical book. This is a book which everybody is well acquainted. Everybody knows. The student of philosophy knows it, and the student of literature knows it, the student of politics knows it. So this is in my hand, the Plato's Republic. So in this book, many questions have been debated by Plato and in the form of dialogue. Why do men behave justly? This is the questions. Is it because they fear societal punishment? Are they trembling before notions of divine retribution? Do the stronger elements of society scare the weak into submission in the name of law? Or do men behave justly because it is good for them to do so? Is justice, regardless of its reward and punishment, a good thing and of itself? How do we define justice? Plato sets out to answer these questions in Republic. He wants to define justice, and to define it in such a way is to show that justice is worthwhile in and of itself. He meets these two challenges with a single solution, definition of justice that appeals to human psychology rather than to perceived behavior. So in this book, these questions are debated in the form of dialogue. And who are the persons of this dialogue? Socrates, who is the narrator, Glaucon, Edemantus, Polemarchus, Cephalus, Thrasymachus, and Cleitophon. This book is consisted about 10 chapters. So let us discuss this book, the Republic of Plato. Plato's strategy in the Republic is to first explicate the primary notion of societal or political justice, and then to drive an analogous concept of individual justice. In book 2, 3, and 4, Plato identifies political justice as harmony in a structured political body. An ideal society consists of three main classes of people: producers like craftsmen, farmers, artisans; auxiliaries class, the warrior, the soldier class; and the guardian, a ruler class. A society is just when relation between these three classes are right, according to Plato. Each group must perform its appropriate function, and only that function, and each must be in the right position of power in relation to other. Ruler must rule, auxiliaries must uphold ruler's conviction and order, and producer must limit themselves to exercising whatever skills nature granted them, like farming, blacksmithing, painting, etc. Justice is a principle of specialization, a principle that requires that each person fulfills the societal role to which nature fitted him, and not to interfere in any other business. And at the end of book 4, Plato tries to show that individual justice mirrors political justice. He claims that soul of every individual has three-part structure, analogies to three classes of society. There is a rational part of the soul which seeks after truth and is responsible for our philosophical inclination, a spirited part of soul which desire honor and is responsible for our feeling of anger and indignation, an appetitive part of the soul which lusts after all sorts of things, but money, and most of all, since money must be used to fulfill any other base desire. The just individual can be defined in analogy with just society. The three parts of the soul achieve the requisite relationship of power and influence in regard to one another. In a just individual, the rational part of soul rules. The spirited part of the soul support this rule, and the appetitive part of soul submit and follows wherever reason leads. Put more plainly, in a just individual, the entire soul aim at fulfilling the desire of rational part. Much as in a just society, entire community aims at fulfilling whatever the rulers will. The parallel between just society and the just individual runs deep. Each of the three classes of society, in fact, is dominated by one of the three parts of the soul. Producers are dominated by their appetite, their urges for money, luxury, and pleasure. Warriors are dominated by their spirit, which makes them courageous. Rulers are dominated by their rational faculty and strive for wisdom. Book 5 through Book 7 focus on the ruler as the philosopher king. In a series of 3 analogues, the allegories of the sun, the lion, and the cave, Plato explained whose these individuals are while hammering out his theory of forms. Plato explained that the world is divided into 2 realms, the visible, which we grasp with our senses, and the intelligible, which we only grasp with our mind. The visible world is the universe we see around us. The intelligible world is comprised of forms, abstract, changeless absolutes, such as goodness, beauty, redness, sweetness, that exist in the permanent relation of visible realm and makes it possible. An apple is red and sweet, the theory goes, because it participates in the form of redness and sweetness. Only the forms are object of knowledge, because only they possess the eternal, unchanging truth that the mind, not the sense, must apprehend. Only those whose minds are trained to grasp the forms, the philosopher, we can know anything at all. In particular, what the philosopher must know in order to become able ruler in the form of the good, the source of all other forms of knowledge, truth, and beauty. Plato cannot describe this form directly, but he claims that it is to the intelligible realm that the sun is to the visible realm. Using the allegory of the cave, Plato paints an evocative portrait of the philosopher's soul moving through various stages of cognition, represented by the line, through the visible realm of the intelligible, and finally grasping the form of the good. The aim of education is not to put knowledge into the soul, but to put the right desire into the soul, to fill the soul with the lust for truth, so that it desires to move past the visible world into the intelligible, ultimately to the form of good. Philosophers form the only class of man to possess knowledge and are also the most just man. Their souls, more than others, aim to fulfill the desire of rational part. After comparing the philosopher king to the most unjust type of man represented by the tyrant who is ruled entirely by his non-rational appetite, Plato claims that justice is worthwhile for its own sake. In Book 9, he presents 3 arguments for the conclusion that it is desirable to be just. By sketching a psychological portrait of the tyrant, he attempts to prove that injustice tortures a main psyche, whereas a just soul is healthy, happy one, untroubled and calm one. Next, he argues that through each of 3 main character types, money-loving, honor-loving, and truth-loving have their own conception of pleasure and of corresponding good life, each choosing its own life as the most pleasant. Only the philosopher can judge, because only he has experienced all 3 types of pleasure. The other should accept the philosopher's judgment and conclude that the pleasure associated with the philosophical are most pleasant, and thus the just life is also most pleasant. He tries to demonstrate that only philosophical pleasure is the real pleasure at all. All other pleasure is nothing more than cessation of pain. One might notice that none of these arguments actually prove that justice is desirable apart from its consequence. Instead, They establish that justice is always accompanied by true pleasure in all probability. None of this is actually supposed to serve as the main reason why justice is desirable. Instead, the desirability of justice is likely connected to the intimate relationship between the just life and the forms. The just life is good in and of itself because it involves grasping these ultimate goods and intimating their others in harmony, thus incorporating them into one's own life. Justice is good, in other words, because it is connected to the greatest good, the form of the good. Plato ends the Republic on surprising note, having defined justice and established it as the greatest good. He banishes poets from his city. Poets, he claims, appeal to the basest part of the soul by imitating unjust inclination, by encouraging us to indulge ignoble emotions in sympathy with the character we hear about. Poetry encourages us to indulge these emotions in life. Poetry in some make us unjust in closing. Plato relates the myth of Ir, which describes the trajectory of soul after death. Just souls are rewarded for 100,000 years, while unjust souls are punished for the same amount of time. Each soul that must choose its next life. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Plato's Republic, and this is it is a very deep philosophical dialogue. I have tried my best to discuss with you about the Plato's Republic. Thank you very much. I hope you will enjoy.